Welcome everyone to the Budget Advisory Team 2014-2015 for the 2015-2016 budget. It's already upon us, the budget season for next year. First of all, I want to say thank you for those who are here, because for those who were here last year, there was a lot of work actually that we went through during the course of each of the months. And really what I want to do is we'll go through the December tab before the night's through, but I want to do a little bit of review from last year, get everyone's opinions as to what happened. One of the things that we'll talk about is how much was actually covered last year, and pretty much what the format will be for this year as well. But let's start by going around the room, because we are videotaping all of these this year, again as last year. They will be available on our website for all to watch. So I'm Tom Murphy, Director of Finance for the school district, and why don't we go around this way?
Sandy Enscone, Superintendent.
Barb Henry, School Board Member.
Lucinda Karstad, Director of IT and CIO.
Kathy Klopp, Health Teacher.
And also the ETA representative.
Yes.
Jen Horschel, Parent.
Brenda Bergstaller, Staff Member, CSE Representative, and a parent.
Tom Sulo, Secretary, District Clerk.
Paul Shepard, Board Member.
And I think it's great also that you guys mentioned you have multiple affiliations. Some of you have multiple affiliations, so I think that's wonderful as well. Not only are you here sometimes as board members, you're also here as parents, you're also here as community members. So I think it's a great role that each of you are playing. For those who were not here last year, it was a good amount of time that all of you put in last year. It's pretty much an hour before each of the board meetings from now up until the end of April. Our job's pretty much done by about April 22nd. And we may have a few extra meetings thrown in for, we have 2 community forums that are going to be planned for this coming year, and other meetings as are needed. So primarily, I think last year was great in terms of it really was the first time this district ever had this type of team come together and look at the budget as a whole. Every year, obviously, one of the primary jobs of the board is to pass a budget. So the board had actually been doing that every year forever. However, when I first started, one of the things that was asked, and I think worked well last year, is to bring together a community team comprised of board members, staff members, union representatives, parents, community members, and again, a lot of you are playing multiple roles in that, and to talk about the budget. And then from there, as you're learning the different pieces of the budget, then to go out and let people know about the budget. And when we say go out and let people know about the budget, one of the first questions I think Dick Minikheim said last year is, do you want me to be a cheerleader for the budget? Because if that's the case, then I am not your man. And we said flat out, that is not what we're looking for. All we're asking of each and every one here is to learn about the budget and tell people about what you learn. Good, bad. I mean, it was not necessarily an easy budget process last year, because unfortunately, as past several years have gone, we don't start with a surplus of cash. We start in a deficit situation, and by the end, we need to actually have a balanced budget. So when you're about $2 million short, finding $2 million is no easy feat. In addition to making up the deficit situation, we really had a lot last year of education going on, and hopefully everyone who was here last year felt it was valuable in learning more about the budget. I know several comments were made last year. We didn't realize, A, there were so many unfunded mandates. We didn't realize there are so many different components of the budget. There are a lot of pieces that go in. The budget line is the budget as a whole is literally thousands of individual lines coming together, and from the various departments and all the different, whether it's equipment, whether it's staff, whether it's supplies, all the different components that go into the budget. So really what I want to do is, if I can, I'd like to go around the room, and I'm going to skip myself. I'm going to ask the superintendent to go first, just with some observations of what you had from last year, some of the things that you learned, some of the things you might have expected we didn't touch on, and some of maybe what you're looking for this year. And for We have 2 new members on the team this year. One is still joining us in a little bit. What you think your role is? And if you don't know, that's a fair question, because that's part of why we're actually here. So
I can start. I was really impressed last year with the amount of, with the depth of the questions that I heard some people asking. And what I learned is that there will be some topic that will really make you passionate. And that's good, because that's what we need, is somebody who, you can't delve into everything, and there are so many different topics. But if it's part of transportation, or if it's part of transportation or technology or curriculum, then that's really good, and we can always use people that are passionate about something to help us through it. These are the most difficult times of the 30 that I've been in education to try to create a budget, and so we're certainly not going to be arrogant enough to think that we can do it on our own, because we can't. We need other people to help us do it. For probably the first 24 years of my career in education, there was always more than enough money to flow, and that's not the case anymore. So we need to make some pretty tough realizations and possibly recommendations and good questions so that the board can make good answers. Okay.
Mr. Burns, I know you just walked in, so let me catch you up in what we're doing. We are going around the table, so you would fortunately be next. I know you just sat down, and we're just talking a little bit about last year with this process, the budget advisory team, what you learned in terms of this process. And I know as board members you are far more intimately aware of the budget process, but some things that came up during last year's process that you liked, some things maybe that you'd like to see again this year. And for the new folks this year, it's just what you perceive your role as being and what you're looking for, and if we can help you with that as well.
How about you skip me, move on to Bart,
That's
and I'll
the
think.
smartest thing
Okay.
I heard.
Yeah, we'll come back.
Okay.
One thing, I'm thrilled to death that it's an open forum, that we get such a multifaceted people in here, so you get, like Sandy had said, but you get different ideas from different people, because everybody thinks different. I think that's great. A couple of things I'd like to, it's still confusing when you look at and see sports on one page, you see sports on another page, and sports, you see curriculum on one page, you see curriculum on a second page, you see curriculum on the third page, and so I have a hard time defining some of those things. I'm going to recommend or ask if you could, I'm looking through this already, this print is
Very
passable,
small. It is very small.
but the
Yes.
revised budget is unacceptable. I can't read it. I really can't. And
The multiple page one?
The reserve.
Other reserves is too small?
I just
We-
can't make that out. And, you know,
Okay.
for us to be looking through this,
Absolutely.
I want to be able to look at it and not have to go.
What I can do for
That's going to have to be. So a couple of little layouts.
Small print?
The other thing is, if you have any questions for you quickly, there's no numbers on the pages. For me to, okay, Tom on page blah blah blah. There's no numbers on them.
oh, no numbers on the pages themselves.
So for me to refer something back to you, I'd have a difficult time
Got it.
defining it for you.
Okay. Number pages.
I do like the, there's a multifaceted here. I think it's great.
Okay.
And thanks for doing this, who's ever in charge of putting it together. I think it's a great idea.
That would be you, the board. You guys asked for it, so. And absolutely, the small print, what I can do for the committee, and what we will have in future meetings, you will be emailed the materials as well.
One more thing?
Yes.
I'm just going over through this, and I think updated would be a little bit better also. This is from 2011. We need more current.
For the multi-year budget?
Yes, that's too far behind. That's 2011, we're in 2014. 2012, I maybe sweep by, it should be 13.
Can I see what you are
Under our school
report
card.
report card?
Fiscal accountability something. You can't even compare it.
It is the most current one that is on the, and I'm actually going to let Lucinda talk about that in a second, because
Welcome to school.
that's the most current of what is on New York State's website.
How can you make decisions based on?
You're right.
You make your decisions on trends. That's what you do.
Yep, that's a very valid point. So when Lucinda talks, I'm going to have her just mention on that. But in terms, as I said, in terms of the small print, everything's going to be emailed to people in future segments, so you'll actually have that. I try to fit it on one page with you because when putting in multiple pages for the reserves, it was very confusing having it on multiple pages. But in your report, you can make it larger, so you can actually see it. The numbering of pages, excellent idea, so we can easily do that. So, and what you're going to see with the tabs is they're numbered by month, or they're divided by month. So each month, so that'll help break it down a little bit. So absolutely. Lucinda.
I guess from last year, observations I need to point out besides my job title is that I'm here as a representative for the admin team. We have 2 other admins sitting back here. I think I speak for all of us when I say, as of last year, that it was so nice to be able to get up and talk about our budgets. That's how the budget is built, by all of us bringing our different departments in. And so often we had heard in the past someone else just putting the numbers up there, and if a question came up, we knew the answer. And I think being able to have that ability to be able to give the answers or to answer questions that come up, that was refreshing, and I hope that continues. I think I speak for everybody. So what did you want me to speak to on
The district report card. So what you see actually, if you, well, it's...
Why is it so old?
Yeah, it's a couple years old. So if you take a look online, the New York State School Report Card, and basically it is student count as of October 4, 2011, but that's actually what is showing up for the 11-12.
Actually, on Business First had it, and I remember that Edens was 16,000 per student, not 7,000. And they mentioned the special ed, so that's why I'm really questioning that.
I would just be really careful about Business First.
If you take a look, it's 7,880 for gen ed, and then 17,701 for special ed. There's no good number, and we'll go over all these sheets. So I know we're jumping ahead a little, but
That's right.
you're right.
The nation's got to be right for us to make a decision.
I guess that you guys have just really actually said it. It seems to be the trend the last few years with state ed is that our school report cards are coming out later and later. I used to be, like, I think Mr. Graff can agree with me, they used to be like November. Then it was December, then it jumped to February. I think last year, April or May, we saw last year's for the year before. It's just, and the only thing I can say, being the data person, is that they're collecting more and more data, and it's taking longer for them to get through it and validate it and have the districts go back and validate it. So we're getting more data, but it's just taking longer to get out there. So it's my best guess.
And it's accurate at the time they create it.
Yes.
Right.
Do you know what Barb's talking about then with the Business First, where they came up with 16,000?
They won't even tell us where they come up with the numbers. We've asked.
They have their own secret formula
And you
for
don't
a
know
lot
what
of what
their
they do.
formulas are.
Right, right.
Rose.
I'm Rose Heckathorn. I am part of the admin team. I am the transportation supervisor, and I represent, like Lucinda, our admin team here.
Supervisory unit.
And supervisory unit.
And what do you expect your role to be this year? Having not done it before, what's your preconceived notion walking in?
Just to be part of conversation and to listen to what everybody contributes from their viewpoint and see how it comes together to make the budget that we all live by.
Okay. Brenda, would you be able to pass the microphone down to...
You think I need that?
No.
No? I'm really never operated with one of them, so if I'm loud to begin with.
Yeah,
really.
I think it'll pick
you
it
sound-
It'll pick it up, I'm
That's
sure.
okay. So, Laura Feasley is the person who served in this position last year, and she told me to listen, that you get a bigger picture when you hear everybody's piece, which is what Ms. Henry had said, to hear everybody's share. So that would be my goal, to listen to her advice. As I'd advocate for curriculum and students and try to help people get the big picture with the teacher's perspective on any of the concerns that get addressed in the budget with curriculum. Primarily advocate for students' curriculum, and as you mentioned earlier, as an ETA representative, if there's questions I can help answer.
Great.
Thanks. A lot of listening, Laura said. Okay.
Jen.
What I learned last year. It's a wealth of knowledge. No, I think the biggest thing I came away with last year, I had a really a stronger understanding of what the tax cap really was. I kind of had a general idea of what it was and what it meant and how it could be manipulated, but we kind of got, we did get into the nuts and bolts of that. So that was enlightening. You know, and again, listening to everyone's perspective, I come from, you know, when I approach education, I come at it as a parent, as an educator, so I kind of sometimes come in blinders on because that's my focus. But it was very interesting to hear everyone else's perspective, especially other community members who maybe didn't have children necessarily in the district anymore, who were grown, and their perspective was more business oriented. It was interesting to hear, and it was good food for thought, and kind of helped me take my blinders off a little bit.
And I really do believe that this is a process. I don't think anyone who walked out of last year said we are experts at the budget. And I don't expect in 3 or 4 years anyone around the table is going to say we are experts. It's a growing process, and every year, if you get another piece or two, my hope is that pretty much the team that we're seeing here is what we're going to see every year. So I know some of the reps may change, you know, but I think it's a really good process where in a previous district I've seen people have done it for 15, 20 years, and it's a very well-functioning team, and they're still learning after 15, 20 years.
What I learned last year was it was very interesting, and what I'm going to learn this year is probably more of the same, but I don't know what else to say, so I'm just gonna move it along. It's gonna be a learning process. Up to you,
Mr. Shepherd.
Before Paul says anything, I'd like to jump on the back of what Brenda had said. I hope that we do get a little bit more lean this year, a little bit more, you know, make it more advanced for us. Because I think...
Yep. And we...
A little bit deeper into it, so we can kind of better understand.
Hey, Scott.
We will look at things differently than we did last year. One of the things, and I'll touch on this a little bit more, we cover a lot. I mean, if you took a look at everything that we went through last year and all the presentations and what we talked about, there was a lot of information given in a short period of time, which only allowed for, again, so much that we're able to do in that period of time. So if this committee, I mean, we still will have the presentations, maybe there's a part that we can delve into a little bit more. I don't think we'll be able to delve deeply into every area because we will not have the time in every single section, or else we'll never get through the process. But if there are certain parts, we can actually take a look at that. So like, for instance, we'll get into our 5-year plan, which we didn't have last year. So that'll be a good thing for us to see, is where we see the district in 5 years from now. So we will look at some deeper aspects. Mr. Shepherd.
As a first-year board member in the first year, I thought it was very informative of how the budget got put together. I learned considerable about mandates that aren't funded. I learned what part we really play in writing the budget, what parts we actually have any say over, and learned how to save a whole lot of money. Last year it was over $2 million we had to cut. So it was very informative for a first-year board member to go through that process and then to approve the budget. I had a strong sense that we had worked very hard to get the budget to the point where we did. So when we did approve it that night, I felt very comfortable with the information we were presenting.
That's great. Also, what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump back to Mike to give you an extra second to take a look, because what we're doing right now is going and see what we learned from last year's process and what we're looking forward to in this year.
I guess what I learned more of last year was really how much the GA affects school districts. Honestly, I think my first year I really wasn't all that aware, and then last year I think I became very well aware. For this year, I hope to have a budget that has little negative impact on kids, and whatever we can do to do that, I'm all in favor of doing it. But ultimately, that's what we're here for, and I'm confident we can do that. So.
And Scott, we will jump back to you.
Hi,
I agree with Mike. And we learned last year at what the effects of the gap elimination did to us. I think it was a very open process. If people missed it,
Yes, 7 million and counting so far for the gap elimination adjustment. So, and I think a lot of our budget this year will be helped or hindered by the continuation of that. So it'll be interesting to see where that's going to go from the governor's office.
Let me ask a question. Not to put you on the spot.
Love being put on the spot.
I know, you always say it all the time, so I figured I would. Is there an opportunity in the process this year to be thinking about a capital project and a multi-year process in terms of budget development in the BAT? Because I know you do it on the side, but in the BAT, is there?
I might look at that in year 3. I don't know if we want to tackle that necessarily in year 2.
Okay.
I think this year we'll start to look at the multi-year process and actually see where we see the district going over the next couple of years. And then with that backdrop, I think when we get into the next budget process, we'll all have a fairly good idea of where we're going to actually be trending and start looking forward to multi-year. Yes?
And Sandy, do you have any idea or have you heard anything? I know we have a new, Mr. King has taken a different position. And also, have you heard anything on the gap elimination of how it stands this year? And the third thing is, does anybody here, do you understand what the gap elimination is? Okay.
She certainly does. She went to the
Barb, I am
Franklinville
very impressed. You want to make sure, because it's one thing that we really tried last year is there's so much jargon in our business that we really tried hard every time we talked about something new to say, does everyone understand? And so thank you very much. I'm going to answer your second question before the first question. I'm going to turn the first question over to the superintendent, if that's okay. But for the gap elimination adjustment, we're really looking, from the 1,000-foot perspective this year at about another $1 million in the gap elimination adjustment that they would be taking back from us. Correct. So every year the state gives us state aid, and to close their budget gap, what they would give us, they took some of it back. So they're not going to give as much as they're supposed to give. And again, over the course of years, it has been $7 million that they've not given that they should have been given. So it's basically a take back, in essence.
So, may I?
You may.
So in essence, they're trying to close their budget gap. They found themselves between that and some settlements with the bank with over a $54 billion surplus. So I'm not so sure what gap they still have. But I would say that
$5 billion.
$5 billion?
$5
From
billion?
the settlements?
From the settlement, $5 billion.
From the settlements,
settlement.
5.6, 5.4?
Yes, yep.
5.4 billion. What I would say is that last year, at the same time that so many of you started becoming aware of it, so did our legislators. And so some of our senators have said that it's the top item on their agenda. Jen has gone forward and called them, talked to them. She's done so much behind the scenes and in front of the scenes to say, well, if it is, then say so, right? Come out and say so. So we'll see where that goes this year, okay?
And just adding on to that, because that's where I was going, is in addition to them saying that, the budget is a couple-step process. It starts with the governor giving his proposed budget, then the legislature goes and looks at it and says, oh, we like this part, we don't like this part, and then they come up with theirs, and they settle somewhere usually in the middle. But as the superintendent said, that some have already gone and taken the stance of saying that with this one-time settlement, our state is not in a deficit this year. We have more money than we know what to do with this year. That's wonderful news. That's great. We won't touch on the bridge thing. So what we're looking at is some factions want to close the gap elimination adjustment this year. If that were to happen, our roughly $2 million gap will go down to about $1 million, and we'll be in a much better spot. If it doesn't happen, our work will be like last year. I'm not saying $1 million is nothing to sneeze at, and it's easy, and we're, but it's a much better spot to be in than $2 million. So that's where we're at right now, and we really won't have a better idea of the GEA and where we're looking until the governor comes out with his in about mid-January, and then the legislature starts talking about it, and they come up with theirs in about mid-March. And the posturing will definitely be between that period. And if we're lucky, somewhere between that period, we'll hear some good news. So that's where we're at with GEA. Now, in terms of Commissioner King, who's moving on to bigger and better, I'm going to turn that over to Superintendent.
You know, the changeover in the commissioners should not affect the budget, because the budget money as it is not determined by SED. You know, some grants and scholarships could be, but right now I don't think that's going to be our biggest issue. The biggest issue with a new commissioner coming in might be a direction we go, but I don't think in terms of the budget process it's going to make that big of a difference.
Okay. So, any other questions before we get into the binder for this year?
I have one more question.
Absolutely.
I don't see very many, like, we had Mr. Johnson and Mr. Minikine last year, and they're not here. They didn't want to come, or they weren't asked.
Some are going to be taking on different roles with our upcoming potential capital project. Some are going to be joining that committee there as well. And we were.
There's some people just not here.
Yeah, and there are some people who still are not here, but we were very fortunate that many people here are playing multiple roles. So last year we had a large committee, and I think our size is actually still good, and I think we still have very good representation from community and parents here.
Who is not here besides board members?
Board members. Okay, so looking at the binder for December, the way we have it broken out, they're broken out by month, so December up through May. Okay. So just to begin with, the welcome we already did. We've got a charter, the calendar, the Board of Education, district goals, budget comparison, cost center identification. So I'll talk a little bit about how to read the budget comparison from year to year, and then the school budget grid. And if you take a look down, you're going to start seeing on the presentation calendar, and really, honestly, I want to talk about this for a few minutes, because this really was the meat of what we did last year, was this calendar that you're actually seeing. A huge portion of understanding the budget is hearing from each of the departments. So what we did, and as Lucinda pointed out, is each administrator really presented their budget. And that seems like a very realistic approach. They own their budgets. It's their departments, and to hear from them directly as to what is going on is, I think, a far better process than hearing from one person who is really removed from that department and doesn't have the first-hand knowledge. So that is where we spend a lot of our time, on the front end of things. On the back end of things, then we'll start getting into the nitty-gritty of saying, okay, now that we've heard what goes into the budget, here's where we're at, now what are we going to do? So we're going to start out, obviously today is talking about the BAT orientation and going over some of the documentation. In January, we are going to have technology, finance, athletics. So Lucinda, myself, and then Marissa will be first. And we definitely try to separate. Last year we know, and every year can be different. And every year can have a different focus when you're looking at any potential hot topics. Last year we had a couple hot topics, and we had some of them grouped together. We're not going to do that this year. So we're going to give a little bit more time to what were the hot topics last year. They may not be this year. And if that's the case, then great. Something else may rise to the surface if that's the case. So in February 11th, we're going to have the superintendent present, buildings and grounds, Dave Martin, transportation, Rose Heckathorn. On 225, we're going to have the building principals, the director of curriculum and instruction, and then that will be followed by our first of two community forums at 6 o'clock. On March 4th, we're going to hear from PPS, or special education with student services in there, and we're going to start the staffing process. Staffing really is the bulk of where our budget is. So we are going to have numerous conversations about that as well when we take a look at closing the budget gap. On March 14th, we're going to have the second of our community forums. So we're going to look at the expenditure budget, followed by the forum. March 18th, another draft of the expenditure budget. April 7th, we are actually looking for the tentative adoption by the board. That is not the last possible date that the board can actually adopt. However, if we shoot for that date, if there is still more, we still have another opportunity to get the BAT together to talk about this. And then finally, on May 5th, the public hearing on the budget with the vote on May 19th. And one thing I did want to point out, and this will be in the charter a little bit, and we'll talk about this. This team is, in essence, it is an advisory team. So it is important to point out the primary responsibility for looking at the budget and passing the budget falls with the board before it goes to community. And one of the reasons the board wanted to have a community like this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is to get everyone's opinion. You can build a much better, a much smarter budget and make smarter choices when you hear from as many people as possible. But that being said, the ultimate responsibility does still rest with the board to come up with the budget to present to the community. So I just did want to point that out. So if you take a look at the team charter, who, an organized group of individuals who represent various constituents. And what will you be doing? Reviewing, monitoring, validating the proposed spending plan budget that will be formulated by district administration and recommended for adoption by the Board of Education to be voted on by the taxpayers. How? Review presentations by administration of various budget components to be discussed by the team. Written materials to be furnished in advance of the meeting with an agenda as well. So you will have the materials prior to the meeting, so you'll have a chance to review them, which is great because, again, when we get into the meetings, for those who were here last year, we covered a lot. I mean, there is a lot that goes in everybody's budget. So you will have that ahead of time. The BAT team is made up of administration, which prepares, formulates, or revises a budget proposal for review and advisement by the BAT. The budget advisory team, again, reviews the budget proposals and advises by constructive feedback through inquiry questions to administration. And I think that's so important to say constructive. We had a great team last year. We laid as groundwork last year. Whenever you start talking about deficit spending, or not spending, deficits, and closing a gap, it is very personal. We know going into this, tough choices will need to be made, period. And there's just no doubt about it. When you are closing a $2 million gap, not everybody is going to be pleased with the choices that have to be made. That is why you wonderful board members get paid nothing to make those tough choices. And I've said, I think, many times in the past couple weeks, I am so glad I'm not a board member, so God love you all for doing that. But when those tough choices have to be made around this table, and we talked about this a lot with the GEA, if the governor is putting pressure on districts, there's one or two ways districts can handle it. They can either have infighting where they're saying, how do I get my piece of the pie, regardless of who else it affects, but I need to protect mine? Or how do we all work together and come together as a community with scarce resources to get through? And I truly believe, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, I do believe the fiscal picture will get better. I think with the elimination of the gap elimination adjustment, if they work out a couple issues with state aid, with foundation aid, I think we'll be in a much better spot. The GEA, we know, is going away. It's just a question of when. That will help us out tremendously. So when you look at that, if you're looking at a squeeze on us, we'll always have some, but we can get through it. And we did get through it last year, and I think everyone did it in a very respectful way, and so hopefully that'll be one of the ground rules going forward as well. Okay? And again, the Board of Education, review, revise, and ultimately accept the final budget proposal to be placed before the district residents. Building a budget. So we'll look at enrollments, projections by school, outcome-based education. We'll look at the cost centers, accountability. And again, as we start talking about departments, you'll see, again, with accountability for their cost centers. And again, aligning the expenses to what the educational standards are, the district goals, and strategic plans. So when you look at the district-wide functions, it's really broken down by much of the presentations that we're going to see. So if we go from there, the next page, what we're going to see, yes, it is small, and again, this will be emailed to everyone as well. If you can take a look at this, this is all of our BAT members. And we have a couple new BAT members on there, so if you can take a look at your information, if there's more, please email me. So, say that again.
I'm not David. Check the email. Check the email for me, please.
Oh, thank you. Okay, because you took the place of David, so thank you very much. So if you're noticing changes, please let me know. If any of your information from last year has changed, please let me know. We will update this. Okay. Looking at the district goals, we don't have district goals for this year adopted yet, so for this year, they're adopted?
Yeah, we have.
District goals are adopted by board goals.
Okay. So these 13, 14 district goals, we have 14, 15?
These are the board goals.
These are the board, okay, okay. All right, it says district, but board goals, is that right?
I'll give you,
Very similar, we added some to the district.
I'll give you 14, 15 goals.
Okay, and then we can put this in the binder, so thank you. But it's definitely worth reviewing the board goals. The board will review and approve a 3-year written plan to guide facility change improvement. And we are actually looking at that. We are currently, right now, we have what is being put together. It's a building condition survey, looking at the condition of all of our buildings right now. We are required to do that every 5 years. From there, then we'll look to say, okay, once we know what the conditions are, the current conditions, we have a pretty good idea. But once we know the true conditions, then we can start formulating a plan as to what path we should be taking in terms of repair or replacement and what else needs to be done. And that will also guide our capital project moving forward as well. So that'll be an integral part of it. Yes, Barb?
Something else to throw into the pile is any of the damage that went to the community that we will not be pulling any tax revenue off that. Is that going to affect our budget, I would assume? Have you looked into any of that?
First November? And what's actually going to happen with the taxable income? That's a good question, and I don't have an answer for that right now. I can't give you an answer.
Hasn't been reported.
Not yet. And what happens is every year, and there most likely would be some obviously impact to us, what happens is each town will report to us, here is the total taxable assessed value for each area. And from there, that's when we start working on the levy and the distribution of the levy. I'm sure there will be some change to that. I've not heard from any assessor at this point what they're looking at. I think it's too early in the process, but I think that is a fair point to say that with the tax levy is the amount of money the taxpayers pay for the portion of the school budget. All the other funds come from different sources, but the tax levy is the taxpayer portion. That tax levy, even let's say if it grows 1.78, may be distributed differently if the assessed value is lower now because of storm damage. So that is a fair point, actually, but I don't have that information and won't have that information until, well, pretty much the summer, which is when we get those tax rolls from the assessors.
That question was asked in my present. You asked Mr. Petrocarlo, and remember he said that he is a year away, so it will not affect our budget this year because on March he makes the assessment for the following 15-16 year, not the current year. Okay. So it will not affect our budget this year because there will not be any changes. He said that night when he was talking to us.
You mean the year we're currently in?
No, the year that we're planning for now.
Next year, 15-16.
Right.
Okay.
Is that he's 1 year.
I guess you're right. I did ask the same question.
Yeah, we were together when you asked it, and he said that he would not affect next year, it would be the following year, because...
But I'm questioning it, Paul, because it's going to, if the buildings are not built back up by March 1st of this year...
That's next year's, not this year's assessment.
This year. He said they'll have them up and running by March 1st. I'm like, I don't think so.
Well, when he said he's...
it's going to affect us.
Not this year, the following year.
I'm still questioning.
Yeah, the following year is what Bob said. It would be the following year, not this current year that we are doing the taxes for. That's what he said when we talked to him.
I'm still questioning.
And you know what? We can actually email Bob, have him respond in email as to when. Yep, we can definitely get a more pinpointed answer on that per clarification.
And I really don't. I know what you're saying because you did say something about the year round, but I didn't really quite comprehend all of it. So.
Okay. Yeah, he said he's a year out from the current. So if he changes the assessment after March, it will not affect until the following year, is what he said to us.
Okay. The second goal, increase academic rigor and raise expectation for all Eden students. And I think that's so important to say, because while we're building a budget, what we're doing it for is the students. That's why we're here. So all the focus of what we're looking at, I mean, it's sometimes hard to see the forest for the trees when you're looking at the whole big picture, because we're talking money and money and money, but again, it's students. So that's hopefully again a focus. If we can, again, keep these goals in our focus, I think that'll definitely help frame the conversation. And then finally, strengthen the culture of the district by building greater trust through improved communication among all school community stakeholders. And I'm very proud to say that this committee did its part in that last year. I think you all did a wonderful job, so thank you very much. Okay, next, what I want us to look at, this is a 5-year budget. And again, I am sorry, it is not huge print. It definitely is not. No, I know, the reserves. And we'll email that and you can make it bigger. With this right here, last year we had a 3-year budget. This committee had requested and said, why can't we have a 5-year budget so we can see more trending information? So we did listen to you. We have a 5-year budget so you can see for yourselves a little bit of the trending information. Now, I want to describe this for a few minutes. I won't take a ton of time on this, but I at least want to help people, particularly if you're new to the committee, in terms of being able to read the budget and what it looks like. So if we start, you'll see account, description, and each budget year. So let's start when you look at the account. You're going to see there's a letter, then 4 numbers, 3 numbers, 2 numbers, 4 numbers. And basically what it's doing, think of it almost like a funnel. We're starting with the broadest possible term and we keep getting more and more specific as we go across. So that first letter stands for the general fund. We have multiple accounts that we have in school. We have a capital fund for capital projects. We have a school lunch fund, but by far and away our largest fund that most everything is affected by is the general fund. And the state, why they picked 8 for this, Lord only knows, but they picked 8 for general fund. So the state is very sensible and logical in almost many things they do, but they picked 8. Okay. Next, what you see is 4 numbers. At the start, you're going to see 1010. And what that is, they call that a function. That's the largest grouping within the general fund that you're actually looking at. So for instance, 1010, you'll see there are 4 entries, and below that, 1010 stands for Board of Education. Below that, 1040, District Clerk. So when we break out the budget, we start now breaking it down into more manageable pieces. So again, when the administrators start presenting, they're presenting on these different functions, if you will, for their areas. So 1010 is Board of Education, and so on and so forth. And as you can see, they're summed as you're going along. The next 3 numbers are within that group of accounts, what type of items are being budgeted for. So if you see a 451, that's for supplies. You can have 3 digits that start with 1s, so 100s, those are personnel costs. Numbers that start with 2s, those are equipment costs. And numbers which are 4, and those are predominantly mostly what you're going to see. And the 4s are like conferences, supplies, contracts, things of that nature. Okay. The next 2 numbers.
Say those ones again.
100s are staff.
All right, I'm good now.
200s are equipment. And the 400s are those things like supplies, contractual expenses, conferences, that sort of thing. Okay. The next 2 numbers, those are what we call location. For us, we use them as building. 00 is district. 01, junior senior high school. 02, elementary. 04, GLP, and 03 is a defunct code. So for an
what
old.
was GLP again?
04.
There must have been a middle school code or something.
Does anyone who's been here a while remember what 03 used to be?
I'll bet it used to be the middle school code.
Either that or it was the other primary school.
Up on East Eden.
Could be.
I'll bet you're right.
That would make sense. And the final 4 numbers, again, are broken down even more. So let's say if we're looking at, and this isn't a great example, but I'm just going to say it anyway. So if the 1010 code, let's say it's a 2000 code, or 2100 code, which is instruction. So if we're looking at instruction, and we'll keep everything else the same, 451, which is supplies. And if that 2-digit code read 01, that'd be junior, senior high school. Now you might have a 4-digit code now to break it down even further. So by department. So if it's art, music, social, ELA, and breaking it down by section, by what they call a program code. Okay. So hopefully that helps. You will see, again, under description, really description, quite honestly, is really looking at that 3-digit code. So that 451 is supplies. Okay. The 457 right below it, periodicals. That 475 is conference and travel. And then you start to see the trend for the 5 years. You can see what we've done for the last 5 years for the budget. Okay. I won't go through each and every line. You can definitely take a look at that at your leisure, because I promised you we would be done by 6:45.
Tom, I ask a question?
Sure.
Are there any lines that have changed over the course of the past couple of years?
We've added new lines. We've gotten rid of lines. There are some new expenditures which we may not have had years ago. We'll create a new budget line for. And then there are some that have happened for years and things change and we don't use them anymore. So yes, you will actually, that's a good point to mention. So if you see something like that and you see all of a sudden it started new, it could be one or two things. It could be a new program, or you can see it used to have numbers, now nothing anymore. Sometimes we recode things for whether it's audit purposes or whatnot, things may move to different areas. So, and if there are major moves, and we'll try and tell you, we know that this expenditure, which used to be here, is now quoted over here. If it's a $10 expense, we're probably not going to tell you because it's so small, but if it's a large one, we'll definitely try and keep that in mind. Next, the school report card. This is what Barb was talking about, looking at the school report card, the fiscal accountability supplement. This is from 2010-11, and I think Barb's comments are very well put, that the state is giving us the most current of information to actually look at, but it's good to see, if for no other reason, to kind of get a rough gauge as to where we are and what things cost. So for instance, if you take a look at expenditure per pupil in 2010-11, in general education for our school district, it was $7,880 for a general education student. For a special education student, it is $17,701. Now those figures are not exactly what they are today, but it gives you a rough guide to realize that it is significantly more to educate a special education student than a general education student. So that's why I give you this, not so you have the most up-to-date information, because they're not giving us the most, but so you can start to see trends and start to see when we have more of an influx of special education students, the impact that it actually has on the district, because there is a significant financial difference as our population shifts. But now, when you take a look at this, I think what's interesting to see is, I think that we do a really good job in this district compared to similar district groups, size and stuff like that across the country, or the state, sorry. So if you take a look, while a general education student here in 10-11 was $7,880, similar size, or similar districts, 9,795. Special education was 17,701. Similar districts, 28,585. And when you look at the average across all of New York State, it is for general education 10,963, and for special education 29,741. That tells us, at least from my read, and anyone tell me if you see any different, we're doing a pretty good job with what we actually have. So when we cost less than districts our size, and when we cost less than the state average, that's a good thing. So that is good to see.
Can I just add?
Absolutely.
You keep saying
similar district group.
To our size.
It's not necessarily size.
It's not necessarily size. It's
Thank
also
you.
size and economics.
Yep.
So you
Thank
might
you.
say, oh, well, they're comparing us.
Yeah, it's not to size.
Yeah, so it is.
Thank you.
And our area, like sort of urban rural, they aren't going to compare us to an inner city school district that's
the same, you know, does that make sense? So it's similar.
Right.
And more than just size.
Good point.
So, yeah.
Thank you. And then when everything is averaged together, you'll see, again, with our district, it's 15,485. Similar district group, 18,876, and for all of New York State, 20,410. Again, I think we're doing a pretty good job, relatively speaking.
With that 15,485, that is posted as dispersed.
Okay.
16 or something.
Okay.
Some days.
Now, when you take a look at the next, it really is a breakout for special education. One of the goals is to have children in the least restrictive environment possible. And Sandy, with your background, if I'm saying anything out of turn, please correct me
I think you're going to be fine.
as I'm going. If you take a look, and really kind of what I want to focus on is the percentages for our district, similar in total. So when you take a look at the categories, 80% or more of the time in a student placement inside a regular classroom. That is the least restrictive environment. If you take a look at our district, 75.7% of the students,
That are
80% or more,
identified.
that are identified, 80% or more of the time they're in a general education setting. Similar districts, district groups, 58.1, and across the state, 57.3. And again, what that tells me is that we are doing a really good job of least restrictive environment. And so when you take a look at the percentages for each, our districts, similar groups, and state, they all add up to 100. So again, it's how they're divvying up the pie, and for us, more of our pie is in the least restrictive environment. That's good.
You could do the converse to that one, which is this one.
Okay. Well, actually, I'll let you take the other setting. How
So
about
if you
that?
take a look at the bottom of that same chart that Tom was talking about, which is other settings, or separate settings, either one, what you're talking about is taking them out into another district, which is actually the least of, it's the most restrictive that you could think about, sending them away. And so we send very, very few of our students away. So the reason that I think it's important is because when we start to take a look at our special ed budget, you say, oh my goodness, right? But that's because we're keeping them here. And what we've done, and what Sean, and especially Brenda, who knows it better than anyone, has done, is attempted to bring other students from other districts to us, so that we're then charging them money as opposed to us paying money out to send our kids out. So it's somewhat of a revenue stream, but also creating a program for us with more than one student of the similar kind that makes more sense to try to have a classroom.
The one thing that I will point out on that last one, when you take a look at classification rate, we are a little bit higher than either similar district groups or the state. And we really, I think, particularly over the last couple of years, have really seen an influx of special education students. We do a wonderful job here, an excellent job, and I think that reputation has gotten out, and that's good and that's bad. The good part is the students are getting a wonderful education. The hard part with that is when you take a look at the first page and see the cost for a general education student, special education student, and that differential, we are proportionally changing fundamentally where we're spending our money.
And I would say that from what my conversations with Sean Johnson have been is Frontier, Iroquois, Olden, Holland, Eden, and possibly Hamburg, I'm not clear on Hamburg, have all seen the same increase in the number of identified students in their districts. So there's a trend, and it's a move, whether it's into smaller districts and not where they're coming from, is where we start to drill down, and that would be up to Sean.
And the other thing that's going to mean, not only is it a shift of where we're spending resources, but again, if our population is decreasing and you're taking a look at more of them special ed, now we again have to make tougher choices, because it's not like the dollar spent on students is going down, it's actually going up because it's a more expensive student that you're actually dealing with. So that makes our choices, our spending, even wiser of what we have to do, if that makes sense. Okay? And finally, and I'm going to email all of this to you, are the reserves. And in a nutshell, what I'm going to say about reserves, and you'll be able to take a look at this, we have actually done a good job over the last couple of years of reversing our trend of using our reserves down to depletion, to reversing that course and actually have a steady reserves for us if something happens. Reserves are basically what I would consider as a savings account. So you at your home, if you lose your job, you don't have a savings account, you're in deep trouble. $26 million budget, the same can actually be said. Things happen like you would not believe. We still need to pay the bills.
Like a storm.
Like a storm. I will say there are some districts, honestly, in Western New York that could not pay a bill to get a snowplow into their driveways to open school.
In which case, some of them didn't open. We spent approximately $14.5 thousand just for the snow removal company to come in and work for 13 or 14 hours. That doesn't include any damage or anything else, or overtime. It was just simply, thank goodness they were here, the snow removal company.
And the only caveat I would say with the reserves is this past year, in closing our budget gap, we used more reserves than we have in the past couple of years. I mean, we were over $1 million. That is, we need to be cautious because, again, and I'll be conservative, I will tell you this, we need to be careful with our reserves. If we spend them all down, if something were to happen and other districts are in this spot, you're not going to get bailed out by anyone. So we are on our own for taking care of ourselves. So that is just something that will come into play as we go further into the budget. So that being said, a brief
I have
introduction.
a question about that.
Yes.
You said we used over $1 million in reserve. Now at the
Fund balance and reserves.
right at the end of the year, when we put money back into the reserves,
Yes.
did that replace any of that?
Some of it.
So
It
what
did.
was the I would like to know what was the amount. I know it's in the small print. I
Yep.
haven't had a chance to get the magnifying glass out yet, but I would
What was
like
the
to
exact
know
amount you
in a
used?
larger print value.
Yep.
Of what exactly we took out of reserves last year after we put the money back in.
Yep.
How much we did use.
Pretty close to where we were before we used the fund balance and reserves. The whole goal, if we do our budget process right, is if you're going to be using fund balance at the end of the year, and what a lot of districts do is they will cut off spending at a certain point in time.
Right.
Because they know that they're going to need to use some of their fund balance for the budget. And if you can end the year with a little bit of a surplus, knowing you're using your reserves, because you have to right away for your budget, because you have to have a budget that is the debits and credits and the spending and the revenues equal.
Right.
So you have no choice. So you are required to. But if at the end of the year you didn't spend all your money, you can build up some of what you used.
Right.
And hopefully we will continue to do that. I will say, as budgets get tighter, the amount of money that we're able to put in, that trend, and
It's
we
gonna
actually,
dry up, yeah.
it has been. If you take a look over the last couple of years, and we can do actually, and with the board, we do this. Every year we'll do a reserves presentation,
right.
and what we've seen over the past 3 years is the amount that we're able to put back in has been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, so it
Right.
gets less and less. So our
That's what you want to see.
Yep.
Well, what I want to see is the exact amount.
Yeah.
You know, we added some back in at the end of the year, so how much?
Which is on here.
How much, yeah, but
You don't want to have to use a magnifying glass to see it.
I want to be able to read it, yeah.
Yep. No, that's, and it'll be sent to you, so absolutely. So not a problem. And when it's sent to you, it'll be on 2 pages, so you'll just have to go back and forth, but you'll be able
Who's
to read
over
it.
50, that's the question.
That's it, that's it.
Everyone
Okay.
I hit the magic number and now the eyes are going.
All right, so thank you very much. We are 5 minutes over, but still well before our board meeting, so thank you. We're going to tear down now, so those ladies on that end, if you could please move.